Today we're starting a brand new series called Try Softer that's going to build off of this last week as we spent in Seek Week. By the way, how many of you participated and had just a great encounter with God as you're spending time with God this last week for Seek Week? Seek Week is such great for me. It was a perfect timing just to dedicate time to be with the Lord, to pray, to make my list of things that are on my heart, things I'm thinking about, praying about. I literally personally spent 10 hours in this room Monday through Friday just praying and seeking God, and God really met me on a lot of things that I took out of it. In fact, more than anything, just a lifting of a sense that God's in control, and God's involved, and God cares, and God's got a remedy to everything that I've praying about and thinking about on that list. Which brings us to this brand new series we start today called Try Softer. It's a phrase you probably never heard before because it really comes out of my heart and my own relationship with God. And so I'm going to do my best today to help you to paint a picture, to give a vision of a different kind of way of living life and our relationship with God that can make a difference for the way that we deal with everything else that's going on in our lives. And I'll bet some of you come in here today with some heavy burdens, some things you're struggling with, things you're thinking about, things that are weighing you down. There is a way that God invites you to deal with them differently than probably the way you naturally think to deal with them. So we're going to try and paint a picture for that today and next week in a two-part series called Try Softer. I have to start with this idea that several years ago at New Year's, I think it was New Year's Day or New Year's evening, we were with family, we were sitting in the living room, and we were just talking about all the things families talk about when you're there, and I said, hey, do you all have like a New Year's resolution? I think it was probably New Year's Eve. We were thinking about the next day. I said, do you guys have a New Year's resolution? I was probably looking for one, honestly, because I didn't have one yet, but I was looking for one, something good, like not just the same old, like I'm going to lose 10 pounds or whatever, like what's something major that could impact my life? And I asked them, and there was a lot of like, I don't know, and everybody basically said, no, I don't think we have one, basically, is what I got out of the room, which didn't help me at all. But then they turned it back around on me, and they said, well, Brad, do you have a New Year's resolution? So sometimes I start conversations I don't even know how to finish. Anybody like that? I didn't have an answer for my own question. And they said, do you have a New Year's resolution? I was thinking back in that moment, I was thinking, this is just a very busy year, several years ago. Pretty stressful year. It seemed like things just were going at a rate that just didn't make sense or feel sustainable. And I said out loud, I said, I think this year I'm just not going to try as hard as I've been trying. I said, in fact, I feel like I've been trying too hard in my own humanness. And I said, I don't know even what it means, but I think this year I'm going to try softer. It's amazing how sometimes something comes out of just a random moment. You say something and it impacts your life, or you go through a situation you think is going to happen a certain way and you remember it forever. And that phrase now, I'm going to say 7 years later or something, is got ingrained in my heart because I'm a try harder kind of guy. You just need to know Brad. Brad's a try harder. If I hit a roadblock, I'm going to get through the roadblock. If I hit a challenge, by everything in me, I'm going to get through the challenge. Don't tell me I can't do something because it makes me want to do it even more than I did before you said it. That's just my personality, and some of you are the same way. But the reality is some of the challenges in my life, in your life, just trying harder is not going to solve it. Pushing harder is not going to fix it. Some things, it doesn't matter how much energy I bring to it, I can't change the direction that it's headed. So the question is, what do I do as a result of that? Well, Jesus invites us into a whole different way of approaching things. To say, Brad, I know you have good intentions. I know, Brad, that you feel like you can kind of make it right or solve these things in front of you. But God says, that thing's out of your pay grade. It's out of your ability. It's out of your strength. It's out of the zone of what I've called you to do and enabled you to do. So this thing right here, that thing, yeah, go do that. That's for you to do. But this thing over here, it doesn't matter how hard you're going to try. You're not going to fix it on your own. You're going to have a different approach. And Jesus, if you look at the story, the teachings of Jesus, the New Testament, all these ideas about what it means to follow God, what it means to know God, there's an invitation implicit in it to say, you know what? There's an invitation to say, there's a place in which I can rest in the middle of my storms. There's a sense I can wait in the midst even of my own impatience and find God in the midst of my waiting. There's a sense in which I can depend and lean on the one who set the stars. We just think, set the stars in the universe. I can lean on that one for this situation in my life. And some of you have some of those things right now. They're weighing you down, or they're just big question marks in your life. I kind of hope that that's going to change. I'm not sure how that's going to change. Maybe it's a financial matter, a job matter, a relationship matter. Maybe it's something about your own relationship with God, or a pattern of sin, or a hope and dream to have a certain kind of prayer life, or whatever. You say, God, I don't even know how. And you know at the end of the day that just trying harder is probably just not going to do it. And so the series over the next few weeks, we just want to open that up. We want to have a conversation about that and ask God, is there another way to live? And I think God's going to lead us to another way to live, another way to think. So today, my first message of the series is entitled Depending on God. We're going to start with depending on God, and we're going to talk about waiting on God. They're similar, but they're different. They each are like two sides of a coin. To depend and to wait means ultimately I get out of the driver's seat, and I allow God to get in the driver's seat as he belongs, right? I mean, he's really the one who should be driving all the time. I'm going to get out of the driver's seat. I'm going to let God drive. I'm going to depend on him. I'm going to look to him, and I'm going to wait on him. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about that together. If you have a Bible this morning, you can open with me to 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 13 through 17. We're going to tell the bigger story of 2 Kings chapter 6, but we're going to zero in on a couple verses that are especially important to what we're talking about here this morning. To set the stage, there's two nations. There's Israel, God's people in God's land. They're in the promised land, and yet they're kind of following God sometimes and not following God other times. Sometimes they're doing what God says, and they're rebelling against what God says, and we look at them and say, why are you doing that? And yet their story is just like our story is. And I mean, our story is very similar to their story in our own lives. So Israel's there. The nation above them to the north is called Aram, the Arameans. They're beginning to grow and become more powerful, and they're beginning to encroach down on Israel, and they've declared war on Israel, and Israel's declared war on Aram, and so all these interactions are happening at their border, and the king of Aram says, you know what, let's go start really going down and raiding in Israel. Let's start taking some land. Let's go try to let's plunder their villages. Let's do these things that we do at wartime. But the interesting thing in the story in 2 Kings 6 is every time Aram would make a plan to go do something, God would whisper what Aram was going to do into a prophet's own heart and mind about the plans. That prophet's name is Elisha. Now, at the end of the year, we studied Elijah, this great man of God who then passed the baton to the man we're talking about today, Elisha, who carried that baton and became the prophet of God in Israel. And so Elisha's praying and seeking God, and God's telling Elisha, you know what? They're going to go camp down in this area, so go tell the king of Israel that our enemies are camping there and to prepare to build a defense against it. So Elisha would do it, and the king of Israel would go out and say, really, I don't know how you know this, Elisha, but okay. And so he'd go out, and sure enough, it was exactly as Elisha would say. Pretty incredible. I wish I had that input sometimes on issues in my life. You go out there, and so eventually the king of Aram, their enemy to the north, began to get frustrated. In fact, it says in 2 Kings chapter 6 that he was enraged. That's about the most powerful word I can think of, right? I don't even know what a bigger word is than enraged. He was filled with rage and anger, and he began to look at all of his own countrymen. The people of Aram said, you're all traitors, aren't you? Who's the traitor among us who's selling us out and telling our plans to Israel? And everybody says, we didn't tell anybody. We haven't said anything. We're not against you. We're with you, all these things. And they said, however, there's a man of God living in Israel, and he knows what you whisper at your bedside. That's what it says in 2 Kings 6. And the king of Aram says, well, let's go get that man. Let's go take that man from them. Because if we take that man from them, then everything will change. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 13, the king of Aram says, go find out where he is, meaning Elisha, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. That's about 10 miles, really not that far from where they were. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night, and they surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. That's what you would ask too, right? If you looked out, you get up early in the morning, and you look out and you say, what are we going to do? I remember one time in Christina and I's life, we got a knock on our door at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And that first knock, we were kind of like, what was that? Did something fall? And then the knock came again. We're like, who is the crazy person at our door? What is happening? We got kids in this house. And she's like, get the bat. I'm like, I don't know what the bat will do, but I'll get the bat. And all those kind of things. And they're outside, all this knocking, and come to find out there's police on our front door. And we're like, what are we going to do about this? Is the emotions that they're feeling in this moment as they see that here they are in camp. They're just 2 guys, right? Maybe with 2 swords, maybe with no swords, right? And they think, what are we going to do? We're all encamped around. They're going to capture us, and they're going to kill us. The important to that point is that the danger was legitimate. It's realistic. If you woke up and you were encamped around, all those things happened, you would say, oh, Lord, what are we going to do as well, right? And so the servant says, Elisha, what are we going to do about it? The reality is they knew in themselves, if we just go out there and we try harder and we try to solve it, we're not going to be able to solve it. Or maybe they think, well, maybe we can dig a hole and run away to the hills or whatever we can do, and they start going through that. But that's not Elisha's response, and this is what's important in the story. The servant has a very human, normal response. Nothing wrong about it. But Elisha has a bigger picture response, a different kind of response in thinking about what's happening all around them. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 16. Do not be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills were full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. What an interesting story. Here in the middle of the Old Testament, where Elisha has this response that's not like a human normal response to the fears that are all around him. And he says that line right at the beginning, do not be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Some of you need to hear that this morning. Some of you are going through something. Maybe it's a big deal. Maybe it's just a struggle. Maybe it's a worry. Maybe it's the thing that keeps you up at night, the thing you're trying to solve, the challenge in your life. Maybe it's a relationship issue that you're trying to figure out, how do I fix it? Or maybe it's a financial issue you're trying to fix. Or maybe it's a loved one you're praying for that's not living for God, that you love them with all your heart, and you're thinking, maybe if I can just have one conversation or fix it, but every time you do, it seems like nothing really comes out of it. Or maybe it's a child that you're praying and feels like they're a little bit off track and they're living the wrong way, or like my kids are younger and they're not obeying you, or whatever I might be worried about at night, and you're struggling with those things in your own life. Some of us need to hear that those who are with us are more than those who are with our enemies, or with our challenges, or with our struggles, or with our anxieties. As legitimate as they might be, as a big of a struggle as they might be, Elisha says to his servant, look, I get it. I understand, but I need you to know that the one who is with us is greater than the one who is with them. And as strong as they may be, as challenging as they may be, they are nothing in compared to the one who stands with us. Which reminds us of Romans 8, for those of us studied through this fall. Romans 8, if God is for us, who can be against us? This is what springs forward inside of Elisha in the midst of great fear and great danger and all reality. He says, if God is for us, who can be against us? What a different way to live. It's a faith-filled way to live, to say, you know what, there's challenges. I don't need to pretend like they're not challenges. I don't need to pretend like they're nothing, like it's no big deal. But I need to make a big deal of the one who's bigger than my challenges, who's in charge of all things, who's able to do all things. And this is what happens for Elisha in the moment. What we see in Elisha is that he's relying on God. He said, God, you got us here. You're going to get us out of here. If you have a plan for us, we'll live another day. If you want to take us home, we'll go home to be with you. You're in charge. We rely on you. We're depending on you. We're looking to you. And then he says, very specifically, he says, open his eyes, Lord, so he can see. A great prayer. You know, part of the reason I depend on myself to solve things, and I'll bet I'm not alone in this room, but part of the reason I depend on myself is because I just lack the vision to see how involved God is in my problems. I think, well, if I don't pray about it, then he's not going to be involved. If I don't bring it up to him, then he's not going to care about it. Or maybe if I'm off track, then it's all on me to solve it. All those kind of things. I lack the vision. I don't realize just how able and involved God is. It's not as though he kind of knows about it, but he's distant. No, he's close. He's involved. And Elisha says, you know what? This man lacks the vision. He lacks a vision of God's involvement. Lord, will you open his eyes like you've opened my eyes? Because Elisha must have seen something. And God opens the servant's eyes, and the servant begins to think differently about all the challenges that are in front of him as well. When I don't see, I rely on myself. I give in to fear. I give in to anxiety. I give myself to worry. I give myself to trying to fix it. I'm a bit of a fixer, to fixing it on my own. But when I see, things change. When I see, fear begins to run away from me rather than me running away from fear. When I see, worry that used to be like this comes way down to reality in the face of God and all of his strength and ability. When I see, I stop striving. You know what striving is? Striving is when I try to do things on my own effort apart from God. They may even be good things, but I can strive even in good things. I can try to push forward or force things. If you have anything you're trying to force in your life, maybe it's time just to back up a little bit and say, God, will you open my eyes so I stop forcing this thing and allow you to do things in my life? When I see, I start waiting rather than pushing. This is a different kind of life, a different way to approach things, a different way to see God move in each one of our lives. And Elisha has found it, and the servant is finding it as the story unfolds around him. You know, the reality is God is more involved in doing more in the lives of his people than we can see by sight alone. See, if I look around and think, well, I don't see anything happening. I don't know what's going to happen. My logical brain says, I don't know how we can get from A to B to C to D, right? In any area of your life, you can think that way. But God's more involved in getting me from A to D than I can see even with my eyes. That's why God says, your eyes must be opened. You must have a spiritual eyesight to help you to see things that you cannot see on your own. And this is the life of Elisha. The question is, when difficulties surround me and you, when something seems insurmountable, or when you keep hitting your head against something you just can't quite figure out how to solve, how to get through, how to fix, when you keep trying to do those things in your life, what is going to be our response? Well, on one hand, we can just work harder, try harder, push harder, force things in our life. Or we can step back in the middle of that and say, you know what? Instead of trying harder on this, well, I'm going to pray harder. I'm going to try a little bit less. I'm going to try softer. I'm going to stop trying to push, stop trying to strive, trying to make it happen on my own. It's the exact opposite of what we're taught, isn't it? The exact opposite of like being a strong person pushing through. And there's a time and place for all of that. Look, there's times in our life we need to push through. We need to keep moving. We need to persevere in the middle of things. But sometimes perseverance looks like more like dependence and waiting than it looks like me making something happen on my own. Because when I make something happen on my own, then if something happens, I'll believe that I did it on my own. I won't give glory to the one who's in charge of all things. And I'll begin to carry that burden on these shoulders, and these shoulders were not meant to carry the burdens that most of us are carrying. That's why we feel so busy. We feel so stressed. We feel so much worry. It's because we're relying on self and believing in God rather than believing in God and relying on God and trusting in God and doing all the other things that God invites us to do. I can work harder, try harder, and solve it, or I can do the exact opposite and say, God, I think this one's beyond me. This one, God, I think I'm just going to rely on you. I'm just going to let you solve it. I'm going to let you fix it. I'm going to let you. My enemies are camped around me. My things in my life seem like they're coming in on me. God, I don't think I can solve it. And said, God, I'm just going to have to rely on you on this one. I'm going to just depend on you in this one. I'm going to have to lean on you in this one. The good news is when we depend on him, we actually draw closer to him. We know him more. We come closer to him rather than him being impressed with us and we can figure it out, which he would never be anyway. We draw closer to him. And then my needs become actually a catalyst for my prayer life. They become a catalyst for everything else in my relationship with him. And so I say my needs, they seem like bad things, but my needs are actually, and my fears are opportunities to depend. My worries are opportunities. My fears are opportunities. My struggles are opportunities. My opposition, it's an opportunity. Opportunity to do what? To be closer to the Father, to know the Father more, to get on my knees and see him do something apart from me, and stand back in awe and wonder that, God, I don't know how you just solved that, but you solved that and I wasn't even involved in that. All I did is ask you to do it and you did it. It's just a better way to live. I said, God, I wish I didn't have this need. I wish I didn't have this worry. I wish I didn't have this fear. I pray that you expel it from my heart. But more than anything, I pray that you would use it as a catalyst, as a change agent to draw me closer to yourself, closer to your heart, closer into a relationship with you. Because I know if I get there, then I'll be exactly where I need to be and I'll begin to see things differently, live differently, and have a relationship with you. What does dependence mean in our relationship with God? Dependence means that I lean on him. I don't lean on myself. I lean on him. I put my weight on him, if you see the picture. It means that I look to him. In the middle of my struggles, I become a pray first person, not a pray last resort person. You know what I'm saying? I become a pray first person who says, look, I see a challenge coming. I'm going to begin to pray about it right now. I'm going to begin to seek God's heart right now. I'm not going to wait till I have no other option to pray. I'm going to pray first at the beginning. I'm going to begin to depend right from the beginning. That's what dependence looks like in our relationship with God. Dependence looks like, Lord, I'm going to call on you. I'm going to rely on you. I'm going to lean on you. I'm going to actually pray about it instead of just worry about it. I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to say, God, I'm going to depend on you to deal with this thing that's in front of me. The truth of the Bible is that God is in control, period. God's not in control just when you pray about it. God's not in control just when you make the right decisions. God's not just in control when somebody asks him to get in control of the situation. God is in control of everything that's happening. And the reality is he doesn't need me to control it. He doesn't need me to fix it. He doesn't need me to solve it. May he call me to be part of his plan? He may. And when he does, I will act in faith. I will do what he says to do. There's things for us to do in the bigger plan of God, but he doesn't need me. He doesn't need Brad to fix it. He knows how to fix it. He doesn't need Elisha to suddenly become a warrior that day and grab a sword and his servant to go out there and fight this army on their own and try to become heroes in the story. He needs them to look to the hero of the story, the one who can do it on his own, who has the power, who's in control of all things. And the reality is, hear me this morning, if you're a try-harder person at nature, trying harder often just gets in the way. Trying harder just often gets in the way of a God who's kind and good and already in control. Is there a part for me to play? Of course. This isn't an excuse for laziness. It's not an excuse to do nothing, not an excuse to be disobedient, not an excuse to not to pray. It's actually a challenge to pray more, to find more direction, to take the steps that God tells you to take, and stop taking steps on your own ability, apart from the voice of God, through his word, through other people, through your prayer time, directing your steps. Because when you do it, I'll just say from my own experience, it just gets in the way. And it takes away from his glory when he does it in the end. Because maybe, just maybe, I might be tempted to think that I had a big part to play in what he did on his own. Praying draws me close. It grows my faith. And so we pray, how do you do this? We look at the story. What does the story say? Elisha prays for his servant, what? God, will you open his eyes? So that's what I need. Ultimately in my life, what do I need? to really believe this and act this out, I need my eyes to be open. The prayer that we can pray together is, God, help me to see what you see. Some of you need to write this down this week. You need to say, God, help me to see what you see. And you need to put it on the dash of your car. You need to put it in your mirror in your bathroom or in your refrigerator, wherever you're going to see it. You just need to look at it over and over again. And you need to pray it, not just this week. It may be for the rest of this year. And you say, God, will you help me to see what you see? Will you help me to see what you see? Because when I see what you see, when you open my eyes, you'll begin to grow my faith. I'll stop worrying so much about my challenges and start being reminded of the goodness and the greatness of my God in the midst of them. When my eyes are open, I begin to realize there's more for me than against me. That if God is for me, who can be against me? There's challenges, there's struggles, there are some against me, but who are they anyway? Are they of any merit? Are they of any strength compared to the one who's for me? If he's for me, who can be against me? God, will you open my eyes to see what you see? Because if you open my eyes to see what you see, I will stop feeling the pressure to make it right on my own. I'll stop trying to, that relationship issue that I keep hoping is going to change. I think if I just do this or do that or say that or have this conversation, it's going to fix everything. I step back from it. I sit down in the midst of it and say, God, I'm going to rely on you on this one. Will you help me to see that you are involved? And then will you help me just to sit down and stop doing so much about it and let you carry the load that you were designed to carry from the very beginning, that I was never meant to carry in my own strength and in my own humanness. God, help me to see what you see so that I can have the confidence to give up control. God, help me to see what you see so I can reject the temptation to rely on myself. This is what it means to try softer. It means to pray harder. It's not an excuse to do nothing. It means I pray harder. I sit down and I pray rather than I run around and don't pray. Instead of striving, I wait. I look to the one who can solve the things in front of me. The good news, and there is good news in this, the good news in the middle of it is that God wants to fight your battles. Look, all throughout the Old Testament, it's like, this army's fighting that army, and what's happening over here, and why is everybody fighting? There's so many people getting killed in the midst of it. Like, how do I reconcile all those things? Well, I can't walk through all of that here this morning. But there's this big principle that comes out of all those stories in the Old Testament, and that is that if God's people will just look to God, he will fight their battles. Maybe some of you know the story of Gideon in the Old Testament. The story of Gideon, if you don't know it, I'll tell it right here the best that I can shortly. The story of Gideon is he's got an army of quite size in the Old Testament, and they're going to go fight a battle against these other people that are invading, they're at war at, and they think, we have just enough, probably, people to defend ourselves from this other great army. We can defend ourselves. Maybe we can last through the war. Like, okay, just enough. So their confidence in growing. In a human sense, everything's coming together to make it possible. And God looks at Gideon and says, yeah, but I don't know if I need all those people. Gideon's like, what do you mean? God says, I want you to go to him and say, if any of you are scared to go to war, I'll let you go home. Gideon's like, that is a terrible idea. I know how many people are going to go home. And a lot of people went home. Any of you scared of the battle in front of you, just go home. A lot went home. God's like, Gideon says, God, I want to trust you. Help me see what you see, but I don't see it. I don't understand what's happening. God's like, oh, by the way, part B, I want you to take all those soldiers that are left, I want you to go down to the water, and depending on how they drink out the water, it's going to depend whether they stay with the army. And Gideon's like, come on, God. I mean, you've whittled us down to so little, we can't even go to war anymore. God's like, just do what I say to do. He takes them down to the water. He divides them based on how they drink the water. And Gideon's left after what started, if I remember right, 10,000 in his army. He's left with 400. 400. God says, now there's a group I can work with. Because when I bring the victory, nobody will say it's because of the strength of the 400. It's going to become the strength of their God. And all the nations will say, you know what? We should probably leave the people of God alone because God is alive among them. That's what happens. They go out, and God says, I don't even want you to carry swords. You're not going to do those things. I want you to bang some pans, and all this crazy story that unfolds. And the army that's on their opposition runs away, hurts one another. The victory is won. Why? Not because they win their battle, not because they tried harder. In fact, they did the opposite. They did what God told them to do. They relied on God, depended on God, and they tried softer, and God won their victory on their behalf. What an incredible story. Why is that in the Bible? Well, it's in the Bible because it happened, number one. Number two, because you and I need to hear that story. And we need to hear this story. Those who are with us are more than those who are against us. Lord, open our eyes to the fact that you want to fight our battles. 2 Kings chapter 6, where we are right in the story today. We told the whole beginning and the middle of it. The end gets even wilder because the servant's eyes are opened. He sees all these angels, meaning God is with them. God's come to help them, to protect them. And then Elisha goes out and says, okay, I just prayed for you to open the eyes of my servant. Now I'm going to pray that you close the eyes of the enemy. He says, Lord, will you close their eyes? And it says their eyes are closed. Suddenly, they're all encamped out there, and Elisha walks out there and says, hey, guys, I don't know who you're looking for. I think you're on the wrong road. You're at the wrong city. And they're like, oh, really? Okay, well, we can't see where we are anymore, so can you get us to where we're supposed to go? And he says, yeah, follow me. And he takes them on this long journey, and they go all the way to the center of Israel, to their stronghold, and he gets them all camped there, and they're like, okay, are we on the right place? I can't even logically imagine what's happening. And they get in the middle of the stronghold, and it says, Lord, now open their eyes. And they look up, and they're like, uh-oh, we are in the wrong place, surrounded on all sides by the ones that came to defeat. And what is God saying in the middle of all that for us? It's that God can change our circumstances in a moment. Your circumstances feel so insurmountable to you, and I get it. I have them too. But God can change my circumstances in a moment. It could be that job situation we're going through, like I'm not sure how that's going to be fixed, what's going to happen, how's that going to play out, what should I do? And I'm not saying there's never a thing to do. You're going to make your resumes, go to your interviews, but at the end of the day, you say, God, I'm relying on you to fight this battle for me. I can't fight it on my own. I can't solve it on my own. I know you're the one who can, is willing, and you're already working even before I started praying about it. God, will you go fight this battle for me, this relationship issue, the financial issue, a spiritual issue, a temptation to sin issue, whatever it is, God, I can't just try harder. I've already tried it. Lord, I need you to go before me. I need you to fight this battle. I'm relying on you to do what only you can do. This last week in prayer, I made a long list for Seek Week, several pages long of prayer needs, hopes, dreams, worries, fears, all the kinds of things that we pray about, praying for loved ones, praying for some of you at our church that I know are going through things, putting those on a list. And I was praying through it every day. And then somewhere we got challenged in our Seek Week guide to pray and agree with God and ask God kind of transform the way we were praying. And so that day in my heart, I thought, you know what? I think what I'm supposed to do today is not pray, God, will you do this? Will you do that? And it's good and great to pray that way. But for that day, I felt challenged to pray, God, I'm relying on you to, and I prayed about it. God, I'm relying on you to take care of the health needs of this person that I'm praying for. God, I'm relying on you to help us in our finances in this area. God, it was almost like a confession. God, I'm relying on you to solve this obstacle that I can't figure out how to solve. God, I'm going to depend on you to do that. And I just prayed all my prayer requests that way. Basically, I'm saying, God, I need you to go before me. I need you to fight all these battles. I need you to fight these battles just like you fought the battles for so many of your people for so many thousands of years before me. I need you to remind me that if God is for me, who can be against me? I need you to open my eyes to the resources that are available through my relationship with God. I need you to help me to sit down rather than trying to solve it on my own. God, I'm relying on you to be in control in the way that I know that you already are. Reminds me of this moment in the Old Testament, and Zechariah, another prophet that God raised up, they're trying to rebuild the temple. They're trying to do all these things. It seems insurmountable. They're like, the work that's required for us to do, we're not even sure how it's going to get done. And they're praying and they're seeking God. And God gives this word. This is a word for us here today. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6, whatever your issue is, I want you to hear the same words that God said to Zechariah to you in your life today. And he says, it is not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. Your issue today, it's not going to be by might. It's not going to be by your own creativity. It's not going to be by your own power, your own strength. Those big issues that you haven't been able to figure out. You keep hitting your head against the wall, seeing no progress. It's not going to be more by trying harder. It's going to be by my Spirit, says the Lord. God's going to have to do the kind of thing that only God can do for you. And God can, and God will, and God's already marshaling his plans to your need. The question is, will you let him just be who he is for you and fight your battle? Whatever that is for you, say, God, I hear you. It's not going to be by might. It's not going to be by power, but it's going to be by your Spirit at work in and through and around me. That what's in front of me must be solved. As I close the message here today, the beginning of our Try Softer series next week, excited for what we're going to talk about and how that applies to our life in a similar but different side of the coin on this conversation about what it looks like for us to follow God. This is a new year. New Year's are for new resolutions. I think the best kind of resolution you can set are spiritual resolutions. I mean, fitness is great, money's great. You should have all those kind of goals, and maybe some of you are like, I don't know, I've had resolutions, they never come through. But there's a different kind of anti-resolution that I'm promoting today. It's kind of on the other end of it. It's sort of like, I'm actually going to do less, and I'm going to pray more. I'm going to solve less, and I'm going to trust more. I'm going to be on my own less, and I'm going to be with him more. And that kind of decision could change your life forever. Some of you are here today, you didn't see this coming. You don't know what I don't know what we're going to talk about. But you hear it, and it feels like it's a message for you. You've got to make a list of those things and those issues that you're dealing with. Make that list and just pray through, God, I'm relying on you to figure this out. Lord, I'm relying on you to figure this out. Lord, I'm relying on you to figure this out. And Lord, if you have something for me to do, tell me what to do. And I'll do it with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. I'll do it, but until you tell me to do it, I'm going to just sit down and I'm going to let you move and do what only you can do. This kind of life is a life of less stress. Some of you are stressed. Some of us are stressed. It's a life of less stress, less hurry, less busyness. It's a life of less fear. How many of you are like, yes, I'm in on that stuff? Less striving, more prayer, more joy, more resting, more sitting rather than moving, and more depending. And that's the kind of life that will change your forever. And it's worth it. And it's God's gift to us. Not a duty, but an invitation to rest, to wait, and let God fight your battles. As we pray right here, let's stand to our feet.